You know how Asian families are usually abnormally big and extend across multiple generations of lots of kin and offspring? Yeah, that's what the US did to the Shermans. Welcome to the Armor Academy. The M4 Sherman was originally made to replace the M3 Lee, blah 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 blah. You probably don't want to hear this, so if you came here genuinely curious about the M4 Sherman, go to its Wikipedia article or watch a World War II documentary. Just a fun Sherman fact for you, there's a Sherman in every train War Thunder. This usually means that there's lots of variants to go around them, so we'll go over the main ones that you'll find in War Fund today. But first, let's talk about the characteristics of the M4. Starting with its upsides, a standout feature of the Sherman is its stabilizer. While it may seem like a bit of a pointless feature at first, you'd be quite surprised how much it can save you. It reduces the time needed to brake and then aim precisely then shoot normally, to just aiming and pressing M1 on the move. It also boasts both a fast third traverse and forward gear speed. Combined with the aforementioned stabilizer, the Sherman excels in flanking and urban sprawl environments. The cannon can also be quite potent too if you give it a chance, just barely enough to go through common weak spots of enemies you'll face, such as Panzer IVs, T-34s, KV-1s, amongst others. That's about where its strengths end though, unfortunately. While the armor may be sufficient enough to bounce a number of lucky hits here and there, any enemy with a functioning brain cell will be able to take one out as you climb the BR ladder. The firepower also falls in some aspects, though I just said it's quite potent. It's the bare minimum to penetrate foes that you'd face in your battle rating, and you'd probably have to put in quite the effort in order to make them work, i.e. aiming for weak spots. Now that we've got that over with, let's go over the four main variants of the Sherman that the USA made. There's two types of Shermans, those armed with 75mm cannons featuring this cast and weaker turret, and those with 76mm cannons which has this much more armored late war turret, and those can be divided into different categories as well. The 75mm M3 cannon was America's first cannon entering the Second World War. He gets a solid shot He gets a solid shot shell penning 88mm stock and an APAT CB cells penning 102mm with a reload time of around 5 seconds dazed. It wasn't the best for anti-tank work in particular, but it was rugged and got the job done, especially for the anti-infantry work it was meant for with an HE cell featuring around 650 grams of TNT equivalent. Now that's a lot of damage. Once the Americans saw heavier and battered German tanks though, they knew they had to change it up. The response to this call was a 76.2mm M1 cannon. It's just about less than an inch ever so big than the M3, but one benefit is that it has more propellant. This results in better penetration characteristics, a solid shot shell penning 132mm, and APAT CBC at 148mm. This of course resulted in the AT cell's filler being cut in half and the reload time increased to 6 seconds days, but it was a worthy trade-off. Now that we've talked about what makes a Sherman a Sherman, let's break down the main family members you meet, from the overachieving eldest child to the weird cousin that explodes a bit too easily. The M4A1 was the first ever Sherman hull to enter production. It features a cast hull which one would be hard pressed to find was effective at soaking up anything other than anti-tank rifles and lower caliber rounds of its time. You'll be able to find her and her variants in the US, British, Chinese, Italian, French, and Israeli tech trees. That's a lot of them. Its fully cast hull features prominent weak spots on the curves when transitioning to the frontal glacis and side armor, and the surface on where the drivers and bow gunner hatches just about lie. It also takes the early war 75mm turret and retains the same weak spot placed on it to fit the turret drive mechanisms. That and ammo is frequently stored on the side, so expect ammo detonations if you don't reduce how many rounds you carry. There's one at 3.3, a couple at 3.7, one featuring a 76mm cannon at 5.0. The M4A2 on the other hand was America's call to a Sherman with just about better protection. The hull is now fully welded, akin to what you'd find on a T-34 or Panzer IV, and its such features better protection, with some parts reaching up to 100mm of more armor if you angle it correctly, not to mention that it gets an upgraded engine over the M4A1. Since going through the frontal plate isn't much of an option now, another option you can also take is shooting the bow gunner's MG port with APHE to take it out. The transmission port is also viable if you have enough HE filler, and the same turret we spotted earlier Shermans have is still available here. There's one at 4.0, one at 5.7 with 76mm cannon, and one at the Russian Type 3 doing espionage work. Up next was the prodigal child of the Shermans, the M4A3. Seen pretty much everywhere, it boasted a couple of upgrades such as the switch from VVSS suspension to HVSS for a smoother ride, another upgraded engine, and some other things that are relevant to War Thunder. The same weak spots carry over, just shoot the MG port and it'll be done with. Try to avoid the turret since most M4A3 models have that weak spot removed and are protected by volumetric. The M4A3 was so popular it even spurred off a couple of other sub-variants of which we'll get into in a second. There's a couple at 5.7, one at 6.3, and a howitzer variant at 3.0. The last M4 variant featured in War Thunder is the M4? It's designated the M4A4 in real life, not sure why Gaijin's assorting it to M4 here. It evidently took after the M4A2's chassis but has one very noticeable change in the frontal profile. These heads protrusions on the whole front. In real life, these were to make the tank more roomy for the driver and bow gunner and to allow for swifter evacuations in case of a bailout order. But all it does in War Thunder is create unfortunately big weak spots for tanks to shoot at. One thing to also take note of here are the extra armor platings on the sides. These were created to protect ammo racks from side shots by anti-tank rifles, though they only help with the enemy's lives where to shoot to cause a cook-off, and the start of the American Apollo space program starting with an unfortunate M4 turret. Most M4A4s to that 370 to 75mm cannon, though there's also a French M4A4 with an upgraded SA50 cannon at 5.0. Okay, that was quite the info dump. I hope you got that. Variants, where? Oh, there he goes. There's a couple of popular ones you'll meet here and there, so let's go over them. Starting off with the sub-variants, here's the M4A3 105. Originally meant for infantry support to destroy fortifications, it's closer to a self-propelled howitzer than it is a tank destroyer or medium tank. This is due to the presence of the 105mm M4 howitzer mounted on its hull over the 75mm cannon. It gets a selection of two rounds, mainly high explosive anti-tank or heat, and high explosive or just AT. We don't talk about smoke round. Both of these rounds fly at disappointingly low muzzle velocity, but the secret lies within the explosive capabilities. The AT cell gets 2.2 kilos of TNT equivalent and the heat at 1.3 kilos, this time in 130mm of raw penetration. These don't seem like much, but if you take into mind that overpressure exists, this means that just by aiming at the tracks of enemies, or the turret to hit the roof armor, you can instantly wipe out an enemy in one shot. If you encounter heavier enemies, the heat cell is more than enough to punch through their armor, but expect a drawn out fight of how little damage heat does and how long your reload is. Did I ever mention that this sits at 3.0 of the boxy Sherman hull? This means that most enemies in the down tier and even a few BRs up really struggle to penetrate your hull, especially if you angle your armor a little. This means that you can take out entire waves of enemies by yourself with no fear, which is honestly quite evil. The only reason it's at this low of a BR is its sluggish turret traverse speed, leaving exposed to flankers, and the long reload time. As a result, stick with your teammates. You're a support tank in this case, not the main brawler, and you should act as such if you don't want to die to an armored car from the side. Another Sherman sub-variant loved by many across the community is the M4A3E2, also known as the Jumbo. Sitting at 5.7, it doesn't look too different from other Shermans on the exterior, leaving many puzzled as to its high BR. This is of good reason though, since the frontal plate now stacks the original 63.5mm plate with an additional 38mm plate on top. This increases the effective armor thickness to around 160mm. Combined with a new experimental turret with around 250mm of armor at the lowest end, this makes it nearly impossible to penetrate from the front. How does Gaijin balance this out? Well, by giving it a weaker 75mm cannon, of course. This practically makes it a pea shooter compared to its foes, especially more so when you realize the King Tiger can one-shot it, but a Jumbo can't do anything about a Königsjäger. More on that in a later video. but it's the all reliable. You can go through most enemy weak spots using the APAT or the, dare I say it, APCR if you put your back into it. You still retain your original stabilizer and crazy fast reload speed as before, which means you can actually put more lead down range compared to your adversaries. If you wanna make the most of the Cobra King, you can use this tank as a brawler on the streets. Due to your strong armor, you can take hit after hit, using your 75mm cannon to shoot soft marshmallows at the enemies until they either perish by your hands or your teammates. Make sure to keep watch of your two Achilles heels though. Your MG port is one many know of, allowing shells unauthorized entry into your crew's fighting compartment and wreaking havoc, and the lower side armor, those who over angle, exposing this weak spot and allowing entry into your ammo compartment on the floor. Psst. Hey, listen. This is a useful tip for you to keep in mind when playing the Jumbo. Whenever you're faced with an enemy stronger than you, they can't immediately penetrate, such as a Tiger 1, Tiger 2, or an IS series tank, make sure to use the die protocol. D is for disarm, shoot his big ass muzzle break. I is for immobilize, shoot his tracks to make sure they don't blame just the transmission for not being able to get away. And eliminate by shooting the appropriate weak spot, whether it be hatches or cupolas, or run around to their side and kill them that way.
The Sherman 5
C, also known as the Firefly, is a Sherman sitting at 4.7 with an additional variant in the Italian tree sitting at 5.0. There's a couple of unique quirks about this one, namely that in the place of a 75mm, it has a British 17-pounder cannon. It only has solid shot for a selection of rounds, as well as HE, but not to worry, it has enough penetration where it has enough of a residual spall to take out most vehicles it meets at the BR. The vehicle itself is very potent even stock, with the stock round reaching 155mm of penetration at 500 meters, and the shot mark 8 round reaches even higher, which can reach 190mm of pen at 10 meters. That's a lot of pen for 4.7. However, there are a few drawbacks to this vehicle, chief among which is the engine, producing 425 horsepower, which sounds like a lot, but given it uses 5 car engines bodged together to make it work, it's very sluggish and unwieldy even spaded, and it's especially unwieldy even stock. Another disadvantage to this tank is the measly 4.5 degrees of gun depression. Compared to a standard Sherman which has minus 10 degrees of gun depression, this is a huge downgrade. But it's very workable on most maps, as the Firefly's armor is comparable to the Shermans it works with in a hold down position.
There's also this gremlin, the M4 T26. A Sherman with a piercing turret placed on top of an M4A2's hull, placed smack in the middle at 6.0. Mobility wise, you'd be hard pressed to find any on this tank. With the combination of the M4A1's lackluster radio engine on an M4A2 hull, with the added weight of the M26 piercing turret, there's next to none of it on this tank. Survivability also falls in many aspects since your armor's paper on the front, and you might as well not have any on the sides. The only saving grace this tank has in armor is from the piercing turret, allowing it to be semi-decent if you are able to get into some sort of foxhole position and go hold down. What's great about this tank, however, is the gun. It borrows a standard 90mm from an M26, and as such has enough armor pen to go through the toughest of foes at its BR, save for the most armored of German vehicles. And even then, it may be rectified if you're willing to bring a little bit of APCR. Make sure to watch out on the M4 T26 though. Because of its comically heavy turret compared to the hull, it shifts the center of gravity of the tank quite a lot. This not only means you can accidentally tip over your tank if you drift too fast like a madman, but it takes a painfully long time for the gun to settle when braking. Unlike the other Shermans which have stabilizers, this one does not. Make sure to use this tank as a sniping tank or support tank, and to stay behind your heavier teammates if the latter, ensuring you don't rush forward too hard. I personally would skip the M4 T26 if you were given the opportunity to play it. It just feels horrible.
Ah, Shermans, they are everywhere. Tout, ils sont dans les campagnes, dans les villes, ils sont sur les réseaux sociaux, et dans War Thunder. In the French tech tree, you will find two variants which stands out of the others. Let's start with the M4 SA50. It's simply put an M4A4 that has been fitted with a 75mm French gun from the late 40s, early 50s. The gun, the C75 SA50, is inspired from the almighty Panther, the 7.5 cm Kampfwagenkanone 42. In 1944, the French wanted a powerful gun for the production of the newest heavy tank and tank destroyer, the ARL-44. They will finally make it, but it will not be fitted in the ARL-44. It will make it inside of the MX-13 prototype. But the inspiration stops here. The mobility is what you would get from an early Sherman, and the armor is nothing great for 5.0. Although, lucky bounces are a possibility thanks to the mantlet armor design or the flat sides armor. Gameplay wise, you want to abuse the holy minus 10 degrees of gun depression, which any Russian tank dreams about, the 1000 meters per second shell velocity, and the 202 millimeters of penetration flat on. If you keep distance with your enemies, you should have no trouble sending them back to the hangar. But if distance closes up, you are still fairly capable in end-to-end fights. Just watch out with that reverse gear while side-scrapping or fleeing. You are still an armored coffin in the end. Woohoo! So watch the ammo count. Overall, a great Sherman. And if we exclude the Sherman of it, I really like it. Okay, so that should be all for today. Wait, there is another Sherman on our list? Oh. Oh god. What is that monster? The M4 FL10 is literally an M4A1 and an FL10 turret straight from the AMX 1375. The gun is the same one as before, without the upgraded shell. You lose 4 degrees of gun depression, some armor, so it is straight a downgrade for the SA50? Nope! Your biggest fear factor is your autoloader, located at the back of your turret. Thanks to the oscillating turret, it's pretty compact and can hold 12 rounds plus 1 in the breech ready to be launched every 5 seconds. This makes these tanks wonderful to play and pretty forgiving thanks to the fast reload and agile turret. As the previous one, keeping distance is still a great plan, thanks to the super great Sherman mobility. I hate it. Even though the armor has worked greater on this M4A1 hull, the survivability is limited. I mean, not as limited as the Sherman Firefly. Thank you, not so useless guy in the hull, and gun depression, and in conclusion, both Sherman are potent, and they will work great in your non-existent 5.0 lineup.
The M51, sitting at a crisp 6.3 BR, is an Israeli modification of the M4A1, which, to say the least, is a polarizing vehicle. It was built as an intermediary, cost-effective stopgap for Israeli tank units to be able to counter Arab-used T-Series MBTs around the 50s to 60s, to surprisingly pretty great effect, though you can argue if this was simply due to Israeli tank skill or Arabic lack thereof, rather than the M51 actually being a good design, but that's up for you. It was armed with a 105mm French Model F1 gun, made to be a shortened version of the French 105 on the AMX-30. In-game, it is the first tank of Israel. Due to its very high BR, mediocre armor, and passable mobility, alongside its really good gun, it's best played as a tank destroyer rather than the medium tank it is listed as. Its stock OCC 105 F1 heat round garners itself a very clean 400mm of penetration, a decent reload rate of 7.5 seconds spaded. However, due to volumetric jank, it can be commonly non-penning or do less than lethal damage when it probably should have knocked out the enemy, or at least penned them. Its OE 105 F1 MLE .60 contains about 2 kilos of HE filler and can, surprisingly, be fairly decent for overpressuring the enemy, if you're not blind assuming. But as previously mentioned, it suffers from 2 very distinct Achilles heels. Its armor only has around 90-ish millimeters frontally, and when you're facing about 3 billion King Tigers a game, it can really feel like you're made of sticks sometimes. Though its 5 crew members can save you on occasion, especially when it comes to gaijinning. But while not the worst, its top speed is capped at 38 kilometers an hour, which makes it in certain scenarios. It also does have the general Sherman issue of having a tall house and profile, but in general, I would say it's best played as an effective sniping or flanking vehicle, and that's how I play it at least. Heat is unreliable, to put it in the nicest way possible. ALLUSIONS is holding me. It can be actually really decent, especially against side armor or lighter targets. I personally really like it. ALLUSIONS hates it. Making your own analysis playing it would be my best suggestion, as with all tanks.
So, you may be wondering, ALLUSIONS! This is cool and all, but how do I actually play the damn thing? And we'll talk about that just now. Taking the advantages and disadvantages of the Sherman earlier in the intro, it features great mobility for a medium tank, and the stabilizer at a BR range where many don't. Your job now is to abuse your mobility and stabilizer. Get into flanking routes that enemies won't expect you to approach from, and use your stabilizer for semi-fire on the move capability or short-stop firing. That is to say, quite literally firing while on the move, or taking a moment to break and then immediately shoot the enemy soon after before they can. Just make sure to note that if you're facing a majority of the enemies head-on with them all looking at you, you're probably doing something wrong. Shermans excel in brawling in more urban environments or places with just a lot of corners and sightlines to approach from in general. Places where Shermans are most often at their weakest are in open fields and sniping maps. They have neither the long range capability nor armor to sustain direct hits like heavy tanks or dedicated tank destroyers do, so stick to short to medium range engagements. Always remember that you are a support tank, and you should be playing it as such. Even if your random teammates are unwieldy and flimsy, numbers can still be a great advantage even if coordination is lacking. The only advantage the Sherman had in real life compared to its German adversaries was its numbers, and you should try to abuse this fact in War Thunder too. If you ever feel like your teammates are frustratingly dense, find some teammates to squad up with and take some moments to play with them. The community where I'm biding my time, Joseph 2000's community, is actually fairly welcoming and not toxic compared to some others I could mention. It's active too, so stop by to say hello and play some games with us. But now I'm afraid it's time for me to go, kids. A German main is angling his panther just like a Tiger 1, assuming the same advice would apply there. Remember, love with your heart, use your head for everything else. Captain, this is Loser.
Vom Himmel hol ich dir einen Stern, du hast gesagt.